Hello people of the internet, it's Amanda, and for today's video, we're here to talk about one of my favorite J-dramas ever, Hana Nochi Hare. Now, if you're new here on my channel, I've basically made a dozen videos about this drama already, but since it's approaching its 5th anniversary ever since the pilot aired in 17th April 2018, I figured I want to do a series of videos about this particular drama, starting from episode 1 up until the final episode. Now, if you don't know, Hana Hare is actually the first drama ever that I started reviewing here on my channel. Prior to it, I had a different type of content, and I really enjoyed doing J-drama content during that time, that it urged me to explore more into just talking about other dramas that I come across with and just make it into the niche of my channel. So it's been 5 years since I've been doing this, and it's all thanks to that particular moment of me just sitting down and talking about Hana Nochi Hare. Now, I just figured, you know what, this drama is really special to me, and I want to do something in celebration of its 5th anniversary. And also at the same time, like, because of it, I became a fan of King and Prince. I didn't know who Hirano Sho was prior to it. I didn't know that a Hanadan sequel was happening. I've been a fan of J-dramas ever since I was a teenager, but I was out of the loop for so many years, going into some sort of hiatus from J-dramas, idols, and all of those things when I entered college. So this one was the one that really reeled me in and turned out to, like, this ended up with me doing all these things now. And yeah, so this really has a special place in my heart, and that's the reason why I wanted to make these series of videos. So yeah. Now, as I mentioned before, I only came across Hana Nochi Hare because I was scrolling through my Facebook page, and it was a day after the series aired in Japan. So it aired April 17, as I mentioned earlier, and then I got to watch it, I think, April 18, 7 p.m. around that time. I was scrolling through my Facebook, and then this page that I was following posted something about it, and then immediately, like, the first frame was the Eitoku logo. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I was completely out of the loop on J-dramas at that time. Like, I was familiar with, like, a couple of works. Yamazaki Kento was kind of, like, dominating a lot of dramas around that time, and so even if I wasn't as aware of what's happening and stuff like that, I was kind of, like, familiar with a couple of faces that weren't the Johnnies that I was watching back when I was a teenager. And so, but I was completely in the dark that this series was happening, and the only connection that I found in it as soon as I saw the first frame was the Eitoku logo. And I think that was a very smart move on their part because it immediately, like, connects you to the Hanadan series. And then I saw Sugisaki Hana, who I've seen in Gakko no Kaidan prior. Even if she's not the star of the series, Hirosa Suzu is the one who was the main character for that one. She really stood out to me for some reason. And there's also Nakagawa Taishi, who I've seen in a couple of dramas as well, but very, very casually. So it made me think, like, okay, so there are couple of familiar faces that are here. Maybe that this will be an interesting watch, so why not? And then we immediately dive into, you know, the narrative of the story. I was really curious as to how they're gonna make it different as compared to, you know, because Hana Yori Dango, it already has several versions at that point, and in the same year, 2018, Taiwan or China also launched their reboot of the Meteor Garden storyline. So it was really more of, like, how is this version gonna be different? Like, they posed it as a sequel to the series, but again, I didn't know that was gonna be it because I was jumping into this series, at least the pilot, very blindly. So I was really, like, wondering how is this connected to the original Hanadan series. I absolutely love Hanadan, but I do feel like, you know, years down the line, around 2018, when, you know, all the more problematic themes when it comes to dramas are being addressed and stuff like that, obviously, like, I figured that those themes wouldn't work as well anymore in this current climate when it comes to pop culture. So how? And then we dive into the character of Otto. Now, with Otto, initially I thought that I wasn't gonna like her because with Makino, it was upfront. She was poor, but her family's because of, of that pride. So especially in the pilot. Another thing is, so as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't as aware of the current pop culture situation at the time. I didn't know who Hirano Sho was. I didn't know that this is like his first official drama. Like his work on other dramas prior to this one, but that's more of like Johnny's centric drama. So this is like the first proper one with like other actors that he's playing opposite with, and that I didn't know that it was connected to his group. I didn't know that he was from Johnny's. I was familiar with Johnny's because during my teenage years, like I was into cartoon and all of these things, but I didn't know that Cho was connected to Johnny's as well. He was just a new face to me, but for some reason, as soon as he was shown on screen, I was like, huh, I don't know, like I literally, and I've been posting about this for years now on Twitter and I think other platforms, but I still have a record of the screenshot that I took. Like the first time that he was shown on screen, I took a screenshot for some reason, and I still don't know why or what the reason was. I don't think that it was because I found him attractive or anything like that. It wasn't really like that at all. It was just that I think I was curious as to who this actor was because I wasn't familiar with him. And yeah, and at the same time, like again, I didn't know that I didn't know anything about him, but after I watched the pilot, I was actually really convinced that he was already acting prior to this. Looking back now, obviously I know more about him as an actor and as an idol, and comparing his skills from when he did Kurosagi just recently to Hana Hare, now it's more obvious to me as his fan that there are a lot of lapses in his acting during Hana Hare. Like there's definitely a lot of room for improvement during that time. But 2018 me, who was unfamiliar with all of the things and who was just coming back to this, didn't notice that at all. Like all my observations about his acting came in later when I started to get to like see more of his works and the way that he's improving. But needless to say, like his performance in Hana Hare for me, especially at the time where I first saw it, it wasn't that weak. Like I felt like he was just blending in with the role that he was given. And it also, like, I think now whenever I watch it, I see that, his portrayal of Haruto, whenever he's trying to be tough, like, the Haruto that was a fanboy of Domyoji, that's trying to project being Domyoji, there's some awkwardness to it. Like it looks like he was trying really hard to act on that part. And now I'm still not sure if it's more of because he still needs improvement in the acting department at the time, or it really added some layer into the character of Haruto because that wasn't really who he was. The true Haruto gets revealed later into the series, and it actually played off into the portrayal of Haruto throughout the rest of the episodes. Like, after it was revealed that he was actually a lame ass boy who loves Lucky Charms, who wasn't really that good in any other languages, not good at fights or anything like that. It was all him, something that he and Kobayashi did. That was a moment that I felt like the true Haruto really came out. And that's where Shaw's acting fell a little bit more naturally. So it still made sense in a way that whenever he's pretending to be the tough Haruto, it looked a little bit out of place. But I do feel like, honestly, now looking back at Shaw's skills from then to now, I do feel like it has to do with his acting ability at the time as well, that it really shows that whenever he's acting really tough and angry and all of those things, like all high and mighty, it shows that it shows in his face that he's acting. And I think it's part to do with the needs improvement part in the acting arena for him at that time, as well as adding nuance to the character. So yeah, I don't know, I just like, there's also that. And then I think what I like about this series as well, especially with the pilot, is it establishes how different Haruto and Oto is from Domyoji and Makino right off the bat. We see that, the use of split screen is used in many of the episodes, showing that as compared to Domyoji and Makino, where they're enemies to lovers kind of things, like there are a lot of like opposites about their views on things and their and the way that if they're trying to like absorb each other into each other's worlds. Oto and Haruto kind of like don't do that, and instead of trying to let the other person into the world of the other, they find their own world in their similarities. So that's, I think, the different aspect of them that is established early on in episode 1, where again the use of split screens, it shows how similar their wavelengths are and how it plays off into them starting off as friends, and then eventually entering the whole love story aspect of it. Another thing that I think I started liking Oto's character when we later learned that there's definitely a lot more depth to why she's pretending to be still rich just so she can stay in Eitoku. I like this part where she was talking about the things that she used to think was ordinary wasn't ordinary to her anymore, and that she started to weigh in how much things are worth and all of these things that she took for granted back then, because to her that was normal. But she wasn't complaining. I like that her mom, who was also, as she described, a rich, like raised from a rich family through and through, wasn't like being annoying or complaining or anything like that. Like, all of them are trying hard in the situation, and it makes you want to root for them, and you kind of like understand that. I like that there's this part where her mom talks to her and tells her that at the end of the day, it's not really because of them wanting to be rich again. It's wanting to bring back that smile in Oto's face that was genuine, like that happiness that kind of like disappeared because she has to be worried now about so many different things in life. And that was what her mother was aiming for, and it wasn't because to get all these things that they lost. So those little things make Oto's situation and family likable. It's not about being pretentious or anything like that. And it's also explained later into the episodes that she understands how pathetic it is, like the pretentiousness that comes with the life that she's living, but it's the only thing that she can do, not necessarily just for her family, but if it's possible to bring back that sense of self and happiness that she used to have. And I really like, it makes you want to root for Oto at the beginning, even if, again, as I mentioned, I didn't know what to feel about her first, because at least with Makino, it's genuine, it's anything, whatever. But then at that point in the pilot, and I like that they put it in the pilot, you immediately understand where Oto is coming from already, and then you kind of like start liking her as the lead. I think the main basis of the relationship for Otto and Haruto has always been their similarities and how they're able to understand each other despite their differences in their lifestyles and classes, and what Haruto has always been establishing about not like Otto not building walls around building walls between them just because they're different. So there's also that. Another thing to add from me that I remembered while I'm editing this video, another thing that I want to highlight about Otto and Haruto's character and their difference between them and Domyoji and Makino is the idea that, they're not exactly strong physically. Like with Makino and Domyoji, they have their strengths when it comes to fighting. But then for these two characters in Hana Nochi Hare, it's more of like their courage, and courage is something that doing something even if you're scared and don't exactly have the skills or the capabilities to do so. And it's evident in this particular scene where there were bullies outside of Eitoku, and that Otto, even if she's not exactly the most capable, she went after there to help the other student who was being harassed by these outsiders. And then for Haruto, it was being reminded of why he idolized Domyoji and that he promised Domyoji that he's gonna be stronger, and even if he's scared because he knows that he might get humiliated in front of the school, and that he wasn't as strong physically, he still went after there to like fight and actually to take a stand. And I do think that that's also one of the biggest highlights about these two characters that definitely separates them from Makino and Domyoji. Again, as I mentioned, it's really more of like strength versus courage at this point, which makes their characters feel a lot more grounded and relatable. And I know, but yeah, just also wanted to point that out. So another thing that was in the pilot, what I like about it is when Haruto, I think at the point where it was revealed that Haruto was just being lame and all of this, I started liking him more. Like, I was like, okay, so this character, he's very, very different from Domyoji. It's not the whole, like, stereotypical perfect character again, which I thought he was gonna be. Because, again, it's very typical for a lot of shoujo mangas to have this like lead who's good at everything, perfect whatever. There's this major character flaw, like for example for Domyoji, he's an asshole, but at the same time, like with other things, people tolerate him because he can do a lot of things and he's really good at a lot of things. But then for Haruto, when I later on learn into the narrative that he's actually trying really hard to be this leader, to be this thing, he wants to have this particular image because so and so and so and so. It's kind of nice to find a character that is at that point, like a male lead character that has to be like that in a shoujo storyline. Like, it kind of feels like, this anime, like the anime trope where the male lead starts from being weak to being strong, but it's put in a romance narrative. And again, it poses Haruto as this kind of like second lead in a main lead kind of position. At least for me, I've talked about this in separate videos before, but yeah, it's one of the reasons why I like his character, is because he is uniquely created to kind of like be not falling into the typical stereotype of the rich boy, poor girl narrative, or just any other trope of he's not completely like super lame, and that's like the main factor why you have to root for him. He's actually very like a very hardworking type of character, and he's very sincere in a way that he's doing his business and has his goals and stuff like that, and it's charming in that effect, and that it's again it takes someone like Otto to encourage him that being perfect isn't exactly like is a nice goal, but it's not something that you should look down yourself on if ever you're not that. So yeah. Another thing about this is when they're having a discussion, like when Haruto was trying to blackmail Otto, I like that in the scene where where they were talking on the side. At first, it's funny because you would think that a member of the C5, people would be watching his actions all the time. They would be wondering what he's doing, having this conversation with this other student. But it also puts into perspective that it's different with Domyoji and the way that F4 versus C5 is perceived in the school. So for F4, there's always fanfare surrounding them. Whenever they're doing something, it's always like people are watching and just, they're not treated as normal students in the school. Whereas for C5, there's still a sense of normalcy. They are quote-unquote leaders or justice doers in Eitoku at this particular point. But it's not like students like really gather around them as fans of them, but rather, it's like they're doing a specific job, like a student council thing for Eitoku at that time, so they can still go about their business. And students aren't just following them blindly. Students respect the C5 because of this goal that they have, that they want to maintain the status of the school and therefore kicking out quote-unquote peasants. I like that, and again, I've talked about this before, that they preserve that cruelty in a way of kicking out students who can't pay their dues enough in school. But it wasn't like the F4 like in the original series, where getting a red card is basically just out of the whim depending on how much you've offended the F4 and all of these things. So again, and it roots from the flashback that we see of why Haruto admires Domyoji. So the Domyoji that Haruto actually started admiring, and because he's talked about it before, like, not being able to face the F4, you would think that the legacy that he's trying to chase after is the legacy of the F4 when they were in Eitoku, which wasn't really the best thing ever. And then later into the series, in episode 7, we learned that Haruto wasn't aware of the red card thing at all. And the reason why he was admiring Domyoji is because of his interaction with him, with the Domyoji that was post Eitoku. Like the Domyoji who's already gone through the experiences of Hanadan 1, 2, and finale, where he already has his redemption arc. In a way, he's learned about the value of protecting people that you care about, of choosing your words wisely, because a lot of people will rely on you as someone who is the heir to such a big company that is responsible for many people's lives. That was a Domyoji that Haruto was able to meet, and therefore and I like that particular clarity puts context into why Haruto has this goal of wanting Eitoku to be better, and it was because of that Domyoji. It wasn't the Domyoji that was in Eitoku during his F4 days. It was the Domyoji that was already the better Domyoji later on. So again, all of these contexts squeezed into the pilot episode of this series, I think, is very, very well done. And they don't say it in a way that's very preachy or that every single thing had to be spoon-fed to the audience. It was sprinkled all over the narrative. And again, I do feel like episode 7 was a really good compliment that wasn't in a manga, to really give us a perspective as to why Haruto is the way he is and why he's aiming for that particular goal, into wanting to make Eitoku a good school again, with like the best school. Another thing that I like about the pilot is with Kono-san, like the way that it establishes her relationship with Otto early on. That plays into the last couple of scenes and sequences of the series, of the episode rather, where why Otto was okay with Haruto being mean to her, but she lost it when Haruto was being mean to Kono-san. So again, these little details of how Kono-san was being like this older sister figure to Otto, like how she was kind of like taking care of her while Otto is taking care of her mother and dealing with her situation. She became like Otto's comfort person, and that gave immediate context as to why Kono is important to Otto. And with the situation, like it's so funny to me, like when Haruto came in, invited them to go to his house, and he was like, "Why are you wearing a white tux?" And then he said that, it's his everyday clothes. That part always makes me laugh. But I like how, Haruto, all of like that entire sequence where Kono was really excited about everything, but then Otto was kind of like, this reminds me of the things that used to be ordinary and normal in my life. But so, and she starts thinking about her mother. So again, we get a glimpse of Otto's character right off the bat. And all of that is supported from whatever was happening and being explained earlier on in the episode about her character. The same with Haruto as well. Like, we kind of see why he wants things to look grand and everything like that, because that's his approach with things. He tries to cover up the things that he's insecure about or the things that he's worried about with this image that he puts up with, like, you know, other people. I love, and I think it was at that point in the series where I properly fell in love with Haruto's character. When Otto was walking home, and then Maino approaches her and tries to attack her, and then we see Tenma earlier on wearing white clothes as well. So it was definitely like a good situation where you're kind of at the back of your mind, it's planted that it might be Tenma who was the one who's gonna save Otto, but then it turns out to be Haruto. And now I think that was the point where I thought that Haruto was really the second lead in his own story. Like, usually it's the second lead who always not really saves, but goes to the aid of the female lead and all these things. But the way that they pose things, you know, Tenma was just so happens to be there after the situation has happened. Haruto was there. He was spouting some nonsense about not liking Otto at all. He was just there to set the record straight and stuff like that. Obviously, that's not what happened. But as soon as he started biting mine, that was a point where I was like, I absolutely love this main character. This is so different. This is so refreshing. Usually we see someone who's just really good at fighting, who's all these things, but this main character was not it, and I absolutely love it because of how silly this entire thing was. Like, that was his attack. He doesn't know how to punch, and his approach was very different, and all these things. And I think that was really the point that I fell in love with the series. That moment with Haruto right there biting Maino, and him shouting at Otto that I'm not in love with you at all. I don't like you. I'm just, you know, I just came after you to say that. And then when Tenma came into the scene, and, you know, and they had this like in the confrontation, and Haruto was kind of like taken aback with Otto saying that she already has a fiance. I think that entire final sequence was the one that sealed it in for me. Was it something that you would say is as magical as Hanadan? I think for people who absolutely love Hanadan, such as myself, who would know how iconic it is, and given how many iterations it has, it kind of just tells why it's a classic story despite its lapses, its problematic themes, and all these things. I do feel like if we're talking about rehashing this story, making it a lot more current, I didn't like how I did an entire review of the entire series of F for Thailand, if you want to check it out, where I do feel like they attempted to make the Hanadan storyline more current, but definitely failed. And I do feel like if you want a fresh like take on that, the nostalgia of the series, but at the same time something that's a lot more fresh, and everything, I think Hana Hare is still the way to go. Is it like, I know a lot of people don't consider it as, you know, something as strong as Hanadan and anything, but for me, I can say that I do think that this is better. I absolutely agree that the ending, because I think it's either they opened up the possibility at the time for a season 2, or it's because they just wanted to promote, you know, like show with the debut with Cinderella Girl and everything, and also at the same time, or maybe it's because just to spark up the nostalgia, and it's also based of like the manga that Kamio Yoko actually did as well, because the manga at the time was ongoing and all these things. I don't know, but if you've read the manga, you would understand why it ended the way that it did. I just hope that, you know, they ended it in a way that's very similar to what they did with Hanadan, where even if whether the second season happened or didn't happen, the ending of that would still be a little bit more satisfying. in a way. But if you've read the manga for Hana Hare, then you would understand why it had to end the way that it did. It's just that I know that for viewers who don't have time to read the manga, the ending was definitely frustrating. But overall, like, if you could just consider most of it, the length of it, I would say that it's definitely a mature, healthier version of Hanadan. And I do feel like in terms of the way that the characters were written, they're definitely a lot better and a lot more fleshed out. And that's a reason why I absolutely love this series. And all of that, like all of those realizations came in just later in the particular in the pilot. And I do think that that's really good because it's something that, you know, that would leave you wanting to watch the rest of it, even if, you know, it's based off of like this big thing, this bigger like Big Brother Big Sister type of franchise that it was based from. And so looking back at the pilot, I don't know, but as I mentioned before, this always has a special place in my heart because it definitely opened me up to this world again of wanting to enjoy J-dramas again, just talking about it and all of these things. And Hana Hare did a really good job in terms of capturing my attention and like making me fall in love with the series in its first episode, as well as the characters, and especially with Kaguragi Haruto as the main lead. Like, it was so refreshing for me for some reason. And up until now, like, even like when I look back at the other shows that I've seen and anything like that, there are very few, I would say, that follow the template of Haruto, who is like the second lead in a story where he's supposed to be the main lead, where he's not exactly the lame loser type of character, because that's usually how it is with many dramas or anime or storylines, where it's either he's just very good at everything, or like he's a complete loser who for some reason a lot of people just root for. Haruto is neither of those things, and he's a perfect balance of the blend of, you know, a main male lead that you want to again root for, not just because of his relationship with the main girl, but because of his own qualities as well. And that's the reason why he's one of my favorite male leads of all time, I would say. And it doesn't just have anything to do with eventually me liking Hirano Sho as an idol and as an actor, but at that particular point, like whenever I watch Haruto as a character, I always think that. And yeah. So with that said, as usual, it's just so enjoyable to revisit Hana Hare. I'll be doing these types of videos, I guess, with each and every episode, just talking about, you know, my favorite parts in each one, discussing it a little bit more. If you don't know, so my first ever video, I actually compressed talking about episodes 1 to 8 at that point, because yeah, I didn't know that that anyone would actually care to listen or anything. But now I just want to like just dedicate episodes and videos for each episode, rather, in celebration of the 5th anniversary of when this series aired. And yeah, so that's it for today's video. Tell me down in comments below, what were your thoughts the first time that you watched Hana Hare's pilot? Did you like it, not like it? Who was your favorite character? Your first impressions with these characters? As I've asked before, are you Team Haruto or Team Tenma? 5 years down the line, are you still Team Haruto or Team Tenma, like when you first watched it? So let's talk about that in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel and you would want to hear more from me, please hit subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again soon in a new one. Bye!